those fat cells lose fat quicker, how can we make the scale be less crazy? How can we avoid these highs and lows and the fluctuations? And now, boom, we see this visible drop on the scale. You will see massive differences. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast, where we help you understand this new body of yours. Maybe you've started to experience some hormonal symptoms, maybe you're post-menopause, but we know now that your body is inherently different, and those old fat loss strategies just aren't cutting it anymore. So it is time to learn how to work with this new body instead of against it, so you can open up those fat-burning pathways, get your energy back, and feel confident again. So today I want to talk about the scale, because I get this question a lot, and people go, it doesn't make sense. How could it possibly be true that I am losing fat and the scale hasn't changed? And no, the answer is not, well, you're losing fat and putting muscle on at the same time. There's a lot of nuance to this. And I also want to touch on, how can we make the scale be less crazy? How can we avoid these highs and lows and the fluctuations? Because it is very hard in our mental health. Let's be honest. We don't want to tie our worth to the scale, but a lot of us do. We hop on the scale, and depending what it says, we decide if we're having a good day, a bad day. It makes decisions around our nutrition, and it's not great. So how can we minimize those fluctuations of up and down? How can we get a little bit more stability? And then also, how is it possible the scale doesn't move, yet people say that I'm losing fat? Make it make sense. Well, that's what we're here to talk about. So what is actually happening with fat loss first at the cell, so you can understand how it's possible to lose fat, but the scale doesn't change. So your fat cells, imagine a circle, okay? And as your fat gets burned, it doesn't just get rid of the fat cell. Fat slowly comes out of that cell first. Okay, so it's like a circle, and now it's 80% full. But our body doesn't just shrink that cell as it does that. There is this space left, and so water fills it. Okay, and so your scale weight stays the same, even though the fat mass is decreasing. And so we see that the fat cell, now is 50% full of fat, now 50% water. And that cell won't actually collapse and die until it's 0% fat in there. So it's almost like, I don't know, like those squishy, like ball water toys that you use with your kids, right? Where there's air in it, you put it underwater, you squeeze the ball, all the air comes out of it, and then you release it and it fills with water. It's kind of like that. The air in the ball is the fat mass, and so it gets released, but the actual structure of the ball doesn't change that much, right? Like it still holds its shape, and so when it goes back to its shape, it fills with water. This is what's happening. And so what happens is that fat cell starts to slowly decrease the amount of fat in it. And what happens is it turns into free fatty acids and to glycerol. The free fatty acids are going to go into our bloodstream and then go to muscles and liver, where our body turns it into fuel for energy, or it gets turned into glycerol, which then goes to our liver and is stored there to be dumped into our bloodstream later for sugar, for energy to do all the things that we're doing, right? Because if we're in a calorie deficit, we need energy. And so we see there's a few things that cause, water to come into the cell when we are going through that fat loss phase. Annoying, but here's how it works. So one, we have osmotic effect. Our body likes to keep a nice balance. If the, volume isn't the same and the osmotic gradient, it's going to go into where there is less water, and that's why it fills into our fat cells. We also have inflammatory signaling that happens during a fat loss phase, believe it or not. Active fat loss increases local cytokines, which increase inflammation. Inflammation attracts water. This is why when we see people who are inflamed, or you feel inflamed, you're like, my joints feel puffy. Yes, if they're inflamed, it draws water to that site, so it feels puffy. This is why our rings don't fit in our fingers when we feel very inflamed, because of the fluid retention that goes there, because of the inflammation. And then we also have to acknowledge that there are going to be hormones and minerals that affect our water balance in our body too. Things like cortisol, of course, we're going to talk about that here. Aldosterone, vasopressin, insulin levels, estrogen, progesterone. They are all going to have an impact on our sodium and potassium levels in our body, which is going to dictate how much water our body holds onto as well. And so imagine, for simplicity's sake, you have 10 fat cells in your body. So if you have 10 fat cells that each every day is only losing like 1% fat out of that cell, the scale is going to stay the same for a very long time before they all get to zero, right? And when they get to zero, the cell collapses and dies, our body releases the water. Now the scale drops down. But now imagine that you have one only out of these 10 cells that are losing fats. Now instead of 1% in that cell, it's 10% a day. So the first day it's 90%, 80%. And so we're going to see that fat cell collapse and die and the water be released a lot sooner. We can't control how many fat cells are actively losing fat at one time. So for some people, you have a lot of fat cells losing fat slowly at the same time. For other people, we might only see it in a few fat cells. And this all has to do a little bit with everyone's body being different, right? And so for myself, the place that I see fat loss first is always in my upper back every single time. When I take before and after photos, the back photo is always the most astounding. Like you can see more definition in the back of my arms and shoulders right away, around like my bra straps, above my bra line, so underneath my armpit. You will see massive differences there because I'll have those fat cells lose fat quicker and first compared to other parts of my body. Unfortunately, it's not something you can control, which sucks. For me, the last place that I'll lose it is always my belly. That's the case for most women. Let's talk about it in a little bit here. And so for some people, you'll see the scale kind of progressively come down. For some people, it'll stay the same for a long time. And then all of a sudden you have this drastic drop. And it's because of how many fat cells are dying on a regular, everyday basis. So what helps turn that whoosh on? What helps our body get rid of some of that water so that we can see the changes on the scale? Because let's face it, we like to see it. Even though we know it's not a measure of self-worth, even though we know it doesn't tell us our body composition, it just feels good, right? I can acknowledge that. I'm just like you. And so what we can do to help with that whoosh, one is cortisol downshifts, our rest day, actual recovery with better sleep, a deload a week from exercise, will we pull back activity. We see that when this happens, oh man, that stress hormone lowering tells our kidneys, you can release water. And now, boom, we see this visible drop on the scale. This is why we see, for a lot of women, myself included, this is a big one. When I came out of my fat loss phase and started adding calories back in, my weight kept dropping because of this. The inflammation went down, the stress went down. So it's actually getting enough food, which allowed my body to release all the water weight and the inflammation that I was holding on to. This also happens when we add in higher carb refeed days. And we do this a lot with women in our coaching program, where we strategically place these higher calorie days or, higher carb type days, because that lowers your stress hormones, allowing your body to get rid of the water, which is great. The other thing that we need to look at is where you are in your cycle if you're getting a regular cycle. Because if we're in our luteal phase, we have more progesterone, more aldosterone, and so we're going to see more fluid retention. When we are at menstruation or after menstruation, we see this drop in that fluid retention. So now the scale goes down. This is another thing that we need to compare when we are paying attention to our scale weight and tracking progress. If you have a regular cycle, is where are you in your cycle? Because that does play an influence on water retention and therefore the scale. And then also glycogen dynamics. We need to be aware of carbohydrate intake. This is something we like to play around with. When we do these carb refeed days, you have to acknowledge that 1 gram of glycogen, carbohydrates, binds to 3 to 4 grams of water. So that's obviously going to have some weight to it. And the reason for this is because that's what helps you with digestion. And so we can see that when we're playing around with carbohydrates a bit, we kind of dry out the body. We might drop carbs for a couple of days to kind of see where are you at? Can we get a new low? Because that tells us a lot about how much fat are you actually losing? It's a more true number. So this is something that we like to manipulate in coaching. And we do it in like a cyclical pattern so we can see realistically week to week or every 2 weeks, where are we at? How is our body responding? And so when we have this whoosh or this big drop on the scale, a lot of times it's our body finally releasing water due to various mechanisms and those fat cells finally collapsing on themselves. And that's what kind of masks your progress, because we see this a lot where women scale weight is pretty the same, only a pound or two, and their pictures look very different. And this is why. And so what does the scale actually tell you then? Because obviously it's kind of crap. Let's be honest, right? The scale gives you your gravitational pull at a single moment in time. It doesn't tell you if it's fat, if it's muscle, if it's water, if it's bone, if it's, the contents in your gut. It's just one moment in time of everything, gravitational pull, right? And we know that can be masked by so many things. And so when we are telling clients to weigh, we like to tell you to weigh every day, because there are so many things that influence scale fluctuations, things that I haven't even mentioned. Like, have you been sick? A poor night's sleep? How hard did you work out? Are you more stressed? Did you have more or less carbs, more or less fiber, more or less salt? Did you poop? Where are your hormones at? Like, there are a lot of things. And so we want to see your weekly averages, the trend over time, because if you're only weighing yourself once or twice a week, you could unfortunately just be weighing yourself on your heaviest days, right? And that's frustrating. So weighing yourself every week, looking for trends and saying, hey, is my highest number not as high as it was last week? Is my lowest number lower than my lowest number last week? This kind of information tells you, are you making progress? Other ways to, also, if you're only going to weigh yourself once a week, Monday is the worst because you're coming off a weekend with like different sleep and different activity and all the things. Your water retention will be all over the place. That's a great way to make yourself go crazy. So how do you know you're losing fat if that scale is not moving? Because we need something to keep us going and be motivated, let's be honest. So one is tape measure. Use a tape measure, measure your circumferences. We do this with a lot of clients as well. Your waist, so at your belly button, top of your hips, widest part of your hips, your butt, your thighs, underneath your chest. You could do your arms, right? Pick a few places and make sure they're not on the same area. Because if I were to measure for my stomach, I would be frustrated because that's the last place that changes. I would need to change and pay attention to my arms and legs first, because the waist is unfortunately the last place my body likes to release fat from, which sucks, but it's just the way it is and you got to work with it, right? But if you can see progress in other areas, it keeps you going. Like, it's nice to see progress. Seeing how your clothes fit. This is a big one. This is why I like taking pictures. As we can see, is your waistband as tight? Use the same clothes in every single picture. How is things fitting around your bra straps or your swimsuit shirt or your tank top? Paying attention to how tight is it around your legs, all those things. And we like taking pictures because it shows us changes over time. And we get to understand, where's your body lose weight first, then we can start looking at those places and compare. Because if you're only taking a picture from the side and your belly is the last place you lose weight from, you're going to drive yourself crazy. For me, I need to take those back photos because that's where I see the changes first. And it's a great way to understand and learn your body a little bit better. And then, of course, you can always take like the body composition tools, right? You can book a DEXA scan. You can search to find where there is one closest to you. Some gyms have it. Most universities have them. You'll have to pay out of pocket most of the time, but it's the gold standard. It gives you your bone density as well, which is fantastic. Your muscle mass, body fat percentage. You can see where your body holds most of your fat. It's awesome. It's a great tool to have. You can also use the BIA scale, so things like an in-body or where you're standing on a scale and gives you the percent body fat. The only thing that I have to tell you about this one, though, it's great for measuring changes over time. For an absolute value, it sucks because I can hop on it, get one reading, jump off, drink water, hop on it. It'll tell me that my body fat has gone down because the electrical current will travel quicker through lean mass and through water. The more hydrated you are, the lower body fat percentage is going to tell you that you have. So that's just something to really be aware of, that you want to do it at the same time, same hydration level, and take it with a grain of salt, just to pay attention to it. Also, if you are taking these measures, like the DEXA scan or the BIA, make sure that you are taking it at the same point in your cycle. Because, again, like we mentioned, where you are in your cycle will lead to more or less fluid retention. So you don't want that to be a factor and skew the results on those numbers as well. So when we look at these whooshes that happen, right, where all of a sudden the scale just drops, we see a new low, we're super excited. We actually see bigger whooshes in women than men. And this is because of where they are in their cycle, like I mentioned before. But also in perimenopause and menopause, this is something to be very aware of and to pay attention to the other symptoms that you're experiencing. Because when estrogen declines and cortisol is higher, we will have more fluid retention. There will be more inflammation when this happens. And so we know progesterone decreases pretty steadily through perimenopause. With estrogen, some days it's higher, some days it's lower, and over time it goes down, but it's very erratic. And so where we are in predicting that can really mask the scale changes. So you think that you're not making any progress when you are, because these fluctuations in estrogen are super unpredictable. And so that's the tricky thing about perimenopause and menopause, specifically when we're looking at the scale, is that we have no idea like what your estrogen level is on a daily basis. And that's going to influence your fluid balance. So that is something just to think about and monitor symptoms. So you can try and kind of gauge, well, am I in a place where my estrogen is lower right now? And that's why the scale's going up. Is my cortisol higher? Therefore, seeing more inflammation as well. And so that's why fat loss and weight loss specifically on that scale in perimenopause can be so frustrating. It's very hard to predict where your hormones are at on any given day for that scale, right? And so how do we try and minimize these ups and downs in fluid retention? Because like I said, that sucks. It's not a good time. You're super frustrated. You want to see minimal up and down, right? Ideally, you want to see just consistent on the downward, right? So how do we manage this? Number one, we are not aggressively cutting our calories and being reactive to the scale. And the reason for this is that when we do that, cortisol goes up. What does cortisol do? Increases inflammation and leads to more water retention. And that in the long term is not good, because that's going to mask any changes that you're seeing. But also, if we stay chronically inflamed and chronically high cortisol, it's going to tank your hormones even worse. So we're going to see your blood sugar get worse. Your thyroid function is going to slow down. Your energy is going to suffer. Your sleep is going to suffer. All of those things are the perfect recipe to block your fat burning pathway and push you into a storage state and keep you puffy and inflamed. And so we don't want to drop crazy low. There is a way to do this properly. We want to, do more of the things that allow our body to release water. So what does this include? Number one, sleeping 7.5 to 9 hours a night. This can make a big difference on the scale. And again, sleep is one of those things that people don't pay enough attention to that make a huge difference in your body composition, but also how you feel in your hormone health and your blood sugars. Programming time down, like recovery time. We're not always pushing hard in the gym. We're going to have a week every 4 to 8 weeks where we pull back a little bit, allow that inflammation and cortisol to come down. So, we can see, where are we at? How is our body doing when we get rid of some of that water retention? We can get a better reading of where our true body fat is, right? Where the scale is at. Including some refeed days. I can't tell you how many people are eating 1,200, 1,500 calories and just sitting there forever. That's not a good place to be. Having those refeed days that are intentional with whole foods, we're not going crazy here. It can really help calm down your cortisol response to allow your body to release water. And walking more, staying hydrated, those two things always help as well. We want to be mindful of the kind of exercise we're doing too. And so resistance training is always going to be great, maintaining that muscle mass. We talk about it a lot here. Doing some brisk walking. We want to limit random HIIT workouts. And the reason for this is that it will raise your cortisol and inflammation, and you're going to see that spike on the scale because of that from the fluid retention that comes with it. And so, these are things that we can add in strategically at certain times. I don't like utilizing it in fat loss because we tend to favor muscle loss instead of fat loss in that case. HIIT is something that I typically only do with women when they're in a maintenance phase and their body can tolerate it, because that ends up doing more harm than good. And You lose muscle mass, get more inflamed, and it's not where you want to be. Pay attention to sodium consistency. If you are having lower salt one day, higher salt the next, we're going to see more fluctuations on the scale. Fiber consistency. This is a big one. If you jump up in fiber from one day to the next, the scale will be higher. There's going to be more bulk in your stool. Digestion will slow down. We're going to see more fluid retention pulled in too. This is why we like to see consistency in our fiber. It's one of the things that we get our clients to be very mindful of. Again, paying attention to where you are in your cycle, and stress hygiene. This is one of the biggest ones. This is why sometimes people go on vacation and come back and they're lighter, is because you're relaxed and your cortisol levels went down. So this is where we're implementing regular breath work, where we are spending time in prayer. That's prayer for me, on time in my Bible. We are doing things where we're actively slowing down our heart rate and our breathing rate, putting our feet up on the wall. We are maybe doing some coloring or reading or doing things that intentionally slow us down. We are so go, 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 go all the time. And if we never take the time to pull back, our body never gets the chance to release that water, but also with that, release that inflammation. Because inflammation is a breeding ground for fat gain. It's also a breeding ground for disease. So we need to make sure that we are actively pulling ourselves out of those states, which a lot of us struggle to do. And then also tracking things down helps, which people are so opposed to tracking, but it is so much better to make well-informed data decisions as opposed to acting on emotion. Because if we acted on our emotions, I would have shut down my business 17 billion times, right? Based on the day and my emotions. Data helps you make better decisions, right? Because we let one bad day or one bad moment dictate days, weeks, years of our life. That's not good, right? We've all been suffering with the scale, with our weight, trying to control our body, feeling like we can't. And so having data helps. This is where we want to track. Daily weight can be great. Doing weekly measurements and photos. Take those photos and weekly measurements on like a Wednesday, Thursday, once we're more stabilized post-weekend. Paying attention to your training logs. Are we seeing strength changes in the gym? How is your sleep? How is your hunger? I love my Aura Ring telling me about my stress and my sleep. It has been one of the best investments I've ever made. And we're reassessing things every 2 to 3 weeks. Is there anything that we do actually have to adjust? Is there anything that we can actually improve on? And I think this is something a lot of our clients struggle with, where they think every 5 to 7 days, like we must be changing something. No, we have to see how your body's responding, review the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks as a whole. See, is there anything that we can optimize here to keep you moving? Because we know this. You can lose fat, the cells get replaced with water. We're not going to see that scale drop until our body actually pushes water out or that cell completely collapses. And so it takes time for that to happen, unfortunately. And so I wanted to go over some common FAQs, go over some truths and myths for you guys on some of the questions that I've seen lately. So the one is did I lose 4 pounds of fat overnight? This is amazing. No, you lost water. The fat loss was already occurring. Just your body finally revealed the fat loss. It doesn't create the fat loss. Well, then if it's water, should I sweat it out so I can see that water get out? Sauna and cardio are going to change water, not fat, right? Great for recovery, but the scale drop that you experience after a sweaty sauna session or whatever it might be isn't fat loss. That's water change, right? It can reveal if you've had any fat loss, but it's not going to actually result in fat loss. And then people ask, well, why do I gain weight after a refeed day? A lot of people get nervous to, up the calories or up the carbs when they're in a deficit, right? We put it on a Friday or Saturday, make it strategic for them, right? And yes, sometimes the scale does go up the next day because water is going to go up. We need 1 gram of carb, needs 3 to 4 grams of water to digest. After a day or two, we're going to see that water be released. And then we can see, where are you truly? We see this all the time with clients where 2 days later, hit a new low. Amazing. We increased carbs, lowered cortisol, lowered inflammation. As the water gets released and our carbs get digested, boom, we can see where we are, which is amazing. And then also, the scale hasn't changed for 3 weeks. Am I broken? What do I need to change? This is where I like to look at your waist, your measurements, right? Your waist, your arms, your legs, looking at your photos. If the numbers there have changed or the photos have changed and your performance in the gym is still good, we're good. I'm not changing anything. We are seeing progress. This is good. And so I want to remind you, don't let a $30 scale define your progress, your self-worth, how you think about yourself, your decisions every single day. That scale is measuring total gravitational pull, not if you're actually losing fat. It can't tell you. Our job is to create the conditions for fat loss and track the truth with multiple metrics and then force our body to release water at certain points so we can see and expose the progress that you're making. When that fat burning pathway is open and your body's holding onto water, the scale is going to lie to you. Keep going. And this is almost more of a podcast for our clients to remind you, this is what we're doing, right? Don't get married to this scale. We're going to expose at multiple points. Where are we? Right? We're not wanting you to be dehydrated. That's not the goal here. And so we're just playing around with the environment to expose the progress that you're making. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you some peace of mind. I hope that this opened your eyes as to how this works and makes more sense of how can I be losing fat but it's not seeing any changes on the scale. I can't build muscle that quickly. Now you know. So I encourage you to share this with any woman that is frustrated or you think needs to hear this, because I think a lot more women need to hear this. I love you so, so much. If you have any questions, please let me know. Bye.